Hi friends, it's Lauren Taylor. Thanks for joining me in my craft room today. It's Friday, so it's a Fandom Friday day, and it's a new release from Kindred Stamps. So I'm going to be featuring the brand new Herstory stamp set from Kindred Stamps today. I have stamped and colored all of the images except for this one here, and she's going to be the focus of the card that I'm going to build for today's video. So I'm going to jump into coloring this character. Now, I picked her because she was my favorite growing up. I had this particular doll when I was a kid and absolutely loved her. So I really wanted to make this be the focus of my video today. I'm using Olo markers. These are alcohol markers, and I've stamped her in Ink on Three's Blackout ink, which just is a great ink for not only alcohol marker coloring, but you can watercolor with it as well. So I'm using 3 different shades of brown to color her in, and then I will do the same combination for the rest of her hair. I did kind of skip over a few parts that were the same coloring over and over again, but you can see how I color here and the colors that I use. I do my very best to keep the caps on the screen, so that way if you have Olo markers and you want to replicate any of my coloring combinations, you can see them, pause it, write it down, whatever works best for you. After I finish her hair, I'm going to move on to her face, neck, arms, and not her legs. She's going to be wearing tights, so just her face and arms. So the dress that she's wearing isn't the traditional dress that this character wears on the front of her books that I had all of growing up, but I'm going to color it like it is anyway. I think this is like a party dress. I tried to find a picture of this character in a dress like this, and I believe it was like a pink dress, but I really loved her kind of maroon hat that she wore and the big gray bow that matched her dress. And then she also had a maroon colored tie around her dress. So I'm going to use that as my inspiration. Since her dress is actually not gray, technically it has like a design on it. I went with a red gray because I thought that would be the closest to creating the gray and maroon colored design on her dress. I figured it would give the same feel of the design by using a more reddish gray color. So I use that to color in her bow and her dress, so the top here and the bottom portion, the skirt portion of the dress, and I will then use a maroon color combination to color in the details of the dress. The jump between RG5 and RG3 can sometimes be a little much, so I like to do the tip to tip method to blend in and create my own RG4 pretty much, of using the 3 to pick up some of the color from 5 and then coloring onto my paper. After I'm done with these little details, I'm going to grab a cool gray to color in her tights and shoes. In the book series, she's wearing some black shoes with black tights, and so I'm going to use cool grays to color those in because I don't really like coloring just straight the color black. So I'm going to use the darkest cool gray to be the shadow of her legs and shoes. So I'm just adding that where I would think the darkest color would be. And then I'll blend it out using CG7, and then I'm going to grab the next one, which is CG5. But again, it's kind of a big jump between the two, so I'm going to do the same tip to tip method and create my own CG6 of adding in that last bit of gray. To give her a little bit of cute little rosy cheeks, I'm bringing in a pink R marker, and that will finish her up. She turned out so cute. I love her so much. So I'm going to go ahead and fussy cut her out, and she looks great. I'm going to add some white highlights to her, but once I'm done making the card. For the card, I'm going to grab my Card Basics die. I die cut the large rectangle out of some true white Speckletone cardstock, and then use the smaller circle to cut some lime green cardstock. I'm going to create it to look like a bush. I had the very first book of her series open, like the cover of the book, open on my computer, and I'm using that as inspiration for creating the front of my card. I wanted the card to look like the meat and then the name of her. You know me, I try to be very careful about what I say. So I wanted the meat of her book series to be the inspiration for this card. And so she is standing or like walking across the cover of the book in front of a bush with flowers, and there's like an iron fence and a little bit of a brick, just to kind of like she's walking on like a sidewalk kind of vibe. And so I wanted to create my own bush. So I'm starting with a circle die, and I'm using a cloud from the Grass and Cloud stencil to just create some texture. It's very subtle. The Later Gator Stellar ink on this lime green cardstock just gives it enough of a depth that you can see some texture, without it being, abrupt lines of the clouds on the bush. And then I have some splatter by just squishing some of that ink onto my glass board. I added some water and then used a paintbrush to flick that on. I'll tap off the excess water and clean up my desk. Next, I die cut a fence. This fence is from the Strawberry House die set. I know it's not exactly an iron rod fence, but I thought it looked close enough. And then I grabbed the little flowers from the door portal die, and I die cut a bunch of the kind of like red flowers. They reminded me of the burgundy or maroon color of her dress, so that's why I picked those colors. Next, I'm going to create what my fence is going to stand on and what my bush will kind of like be tucked behind as well. And then my little character here, she'll be in front of that. So I'm measuring how wide I need my fence to be. I'm just going to trim off the excess. I die cut it out of black cardstock. All of my cardstock is from Cardstock Warehouse. And I trimmed it down to fit the width of the bush where I'm going to glue it on in just a little bit. And then I'm going to trim my own little base here. I'm using a Kraft Speckletone cardstock, and it's been used, I just like randomly have cut it for different dies and things. So I'm going to trim it down so it has a flat edge first. So I'm just going to trim off a little tiny bit. And then I just did my best guess. I think, let me get my ruler. It measures about a half an inch. It's a little bit bigger than a half an inch, but I just kind of best guessed a strip of this cardstock here. And then I'm going to cut it to match the same width of the fence that I've made. So I'm just lining up the fence to the edge of my trimmer and then matching the Kraft cardstock on the left side and then trimming off the right. So it'll be the same length or width as my fence as well. To give it a little bit of dimension, I'm going to grab another stellar ink, this time in Weeping Willow, and I'm going to just distress the sides and a bit of the bottom just to give it, again, some dimension. I'll go ahead and clean up that mess, and then we can start gluing our little bush together. So I know my fence is going to sit on top of the brown little kind of wall. And now I want to add my flowers because I want my flowers to be on the bush before I glue on the fence. So I'm going to grab a wax tip pickup tool and I'm going to add the flowers just randomly around my little green circle. And there also are some die cuts that cut out the centers of the flowers. So once I get the flowers in place, I'll go ahead and add some glue and then use that same tool to pick up the centers of the flowers and glue those down as well. The extra little dots, I believe, are details for the door. Again, this is from the door portal die set. Once my flowers are in place, I'm going to glue on my fence. So I'll go ahead and grab more liquid glue and I'm just going to add adhesive behind all of the posts and then the crossbars of the fence. I don't know if that's what that's called. And I'll go ahead and glue that onto my bush. And then I know it's going to be a little tall. I will trim off the excess green. But then I'm going to glue on my Kraft piece that I made as well. Once I get that fence nice and stuck in place, I'll go ahead and grab my glue again and glue on the bottom. Now I'm going to add more glue than I need because I don't know exactly where it's going to line up with the green. So I'll pick up my circle and glue that piece on so I don't get glue all over my glass board, which I usually do every day anyway, but if I can remember to avoid it, I will. Now I'm just trimming off that little extra piece of green that sticks past, and I think it looks pretty close to a bush. I'm pretty happy with how this little scene is turning out. So now I need to add my sentiment before I glue and pop up my sweet little character. So I'm going to grab my stamp set again and I'm going to use the sentiments Together We Make Herstory, like history, but the female version. And then I'm going to stamp You're a Doll underneath it. Now in the book, the title of the book is in black or like a dark gray ink, and then the bottom has the brand of these little stories and dolls. And it's in a kind of maroonish red ink for her, so or color for her. The other characters have different colors, it just kind of depends on what the character's theme is. And so I'm going to stamp the first sentiment in black and the second sentiment in red. So I'm going to be using Bee Sting Stellar ink, and I'm just going to stamp my first one. So I'll go ahead and ink that up and stamp it. Then I'll clean it and remove it, and I'm going to stamp the next one in Black Widow ink. These are new from Ranger and Simon Hurley, and they just stamp so well. It was very easy to stamp those with my Misty. So now that my sentiments are in place that kind of give the feel of the title of the book, I'm going to go ahead and start gluing my scene together. So I'll start with adding my little bush fence scene, and I'm going to use my Pear Blossom Press ruler to help me get this centered as best as I can and as straight as I possibly can. So I'll go ahead and glue that in place. Once that's down, I'll go ahead and grab my foam adhesive, and I'm going to add foam adhesive to the back of my character. You could definitely just glue her down. You don't need any extra dimension, but I love dimension on my cards. So I'm going to just cover the back of her with foam adhesive. I use scissors to trim them down to make sure they fit into the different places, like her legs, just to make sure there's some stability once I have, glue it to my card. So once I have all the foam on, I peeled off all the release paper and I attached her right to the center of the card. I'm going to grab an A2 card base and I'm going to use a scoring tool just to make sure that that fold is nice and crisp. And then I'm going to grab my big Scotch tape runner and add adhesive to the back of this card front, and I will glue it to the center of the card. I'm going to show off my card here in just a minute, but I'll remember that I wanted to add some white highlights. So I'm going to grab a white gel pen and add some highlights to her as well. That will finish off my card, but I did stamp and color all of the images, the girls or dolls from this stamp set. And so I made 2 other cards featuring the rest of the girls. So I will show you what they look like here in just a moment. I created 2 scenes, again, very similar. I liked the idea of using the books as kind of a inspiration for the cards. So I colored all my girls in and I added some stars, which are kind of a symbol for the company that puts these dolls and books out. And the other one, I added a little fence in the background. I feel like they can all kind of line up together and just feel like they're, all from the same series, which they kind of are in a way. So again, I hope you enjoyed my take on the stamps, especially this card here inspired by the book series. Let me know if you had any of these books or dolls growing up and if you snagged anything from the new release today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll click like, and if you're new here, I hope you'll subscribe and come back. As always, you can find everything I use down below in the description box. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye!